thing and then some in half the amount of space, half the amount of words, right? So learning how to be concise in your writing. Because you're not only doing the same thing here, but giving your own critique of that and your own evaluation of that. So define what an AB is, how to differentiate what an AB is from an abstract, which we're all familiar with now. Right? So then thinking about what are the purposes of ABs. Right? We can see different things from providing a literature review, which we'll be talking about next week in terms of putting together literature reviews. But this is part of that first step of creating and putting together a literature review. How to formulate a thesis on a subject. Right? What is the main point of your research? The main point of your topic, right? Being able to put that idea together. Demonstrate the research you have performed on a particular subject, right? The collection of different sources and information, and thus providing examples of major sources of information available to that topic, right? So you're filtering out through the millions and millions of articles that are out there in the internet and figuring out what are the major sources, the relevant sources, particular to what it is that I'm studying. And at the same time, there are other people out there, other researchers that might be interested in the same topic as you. So you're helping compile these lists of sources for them as well and say, look, if you're interested in doing obesity in childhood, these are some of the sources that I put together. These were the ones that I liked, didn't like. These are the things that help people figure out what value there is for their own research and their research questions. So, steps to writing an annotated bibliography. First part is choosing your sources, which I think you guys have started doing, right? You guys have started looking at a database. You guys had that yesterday, right? Looking online, using citation managers, right? So thinking about filtering and doing keyword searches to figure out what articles might I want to read. Then you review those ideas, right? Part of that is looking at the abstract, reading the abstract. I think it kind of makes sense. It kind of sounds like what I want to do. It's kind of similar topic. The findings sound like it might support or might refute what it is that I'm interested in, right? So from there, you're like, all right, I'm going to flag that. I'll put it in my citation manager, and then maybe I'll print it out, or I'll save it, or I'll put it in a folder, and then I'll actually break the time later on to read it. Right? So far, everyone following that process? So then, that's where we come in. Write a citation and the annotation. We'll do the citation part towards the end, because today isn't so much about learning how to write the citations. You guys will do that later on, I believe. But I want to focus on is the annotation part, right? The writing of what does the article mean. So we'll skip the citation. We'll talk about the annotation. So what are in an AB? You'll find most of these, but not all of these in an annotation. Depends upon what type of AB you're doing. We'll talk about that on the next slide. But most of the time, you'll see what the purpose of that source is. Not purpose of the study, but purpose of the source. Summary of the contents is what was the purpose of that particular study. Okay? So what's the purpose of the source? What's the purpose of the study? And then thinking about the author. Do they have the authority? What's their background? Who is the intended audience? Is it relevant or useful to the topic? Any special or unique features about that particular source? Methodology in which they collected their data. They sampled their participants. The way they did their data analysis. Any strengths or weaknesses or biases that you can identify within the actual source in itself. An assessment and evaluation of the source, whether they think it's good or a critical evaluation of it. Compare and contrasting sources with other sources that you found. And your reflection of the source and how this illuminates your topic. So again, you might not find every single one of these bullet points within an AB or annotation, but you'll find most of these. Right? So this kind of helps you frame, okay, what should I be talking about within these 200 words? So as I mentioned, there's different types of ABs, and depending upon what type you're writing about, you'll include some or none of these. So the two are descriptive or informative, and analytical or critical. And what I have here are just a couple pictures of some notations that you can use when you start reading your papers and start making more detailed analytical critical notes about them. Right, so you can go online and figure out what kind of symbol or annotations work for you. You'll see something that says E for the evidence that supports the main idea, or something where it's C, connection, disagree with it, it's an interesting point, an important topic, it's kind of confusing, or I have a question about this. Right, so these are things that if you saw at the very beginning of part 1, that whole article was just littered with notes everywhere. right? These are those different things that you want to start learning and practicing to do. So let's talk about what the descriptive and informative AB is at first. What's the point of this type of annotation? So obviously it describes or summarizes a source. It also talks about why that source is useful for researching that particular topic. Right? What's the value in that particular, or is it useful or not in what it is that you are studying? And any distinctive features of that particular source. Did they use a particular sampling method? Did they use a particular source of data, whether it's a national source of data, or did they create something new, right? So, or was it a novel intervention that they created? So what was distinctive about that particular source that we were reading? But the main thing about a descriptive and informative AB is that the author's main arguments and conclusions are summarized, but you are not evaluating what that person says. You're not saying whether or not you agree with them or disagree with them. You're just simply saying what they said. So let's take a look at an example of descriptive and informative annotated bibliography. So this is coming from The Economist. Anyone familiar with this magazine? No? One person's heard The Economist? You guys should check this out. So in terms of, this is a newspaper. There's obviously an online version, but also a print version. But it is a highly respected and highly esteemed business newspaper. Like a better thing about it is The Economist. But it's a global magazine, and they have really, really good, credible articles that come from there. So we read this example here, get an idea of what a descriptive AB is. This editorial from The Economist describes the controversies surrounding video games and the effect they have on people who use them. The author points out that skepticism of new media have gone back to the time of ancient Greeks. This controversy surrounding video games is nothing new. The article also points out that most critics of gaming are people over 40, and it is an issue of generations not understanding one another, rather than of the games themselves. As the youth of today grow older, the controversy will die out, according to the author. The author of this article stresses the age factor of overbalance as the real reason for opposition to video games, and stresses the good gaming has done in most areas of human life. This article is distinctive in exploring the controversies surrounding video games from a generational standpoint and is written for a general audience. You get an idea, this is about 151 words. You can see it's simply describing what that author found. What was the point of that particular article? Right? We're not this last sentence here. All they're doing is pointing out the distinctive features of what this particular source has. Right? Their perspective of connecting video games and generational standpoints. Right? That was the unique perspective that this article took. They weren't saying whether or not they agreed with it, right, or evaluating it, what they thought about how they went about coming to this conclusion. It's simply describing and summarizing what that article is. Any questions so far? So, give you guys an opportunity to actually write up a descriptive annotation. So task, I'm going to pull up a video. It's about a 4-minute video. And I want you to watch it for the purposes of writing a descriptive and informative annotation. Then, in about 75 to 100 words, write a descriptive annotation. Okay, so we'll watch the video. If you have your computer up, go ahead and open up your Word document or word processor. So when we're done watching the video, you can just go straight to typing. It'll give you about 10 or 15 minutes or so to write that annotation. So let me know if you still need time to get a Word document up and ready to go. Does it sound up?
Yes. created this dope website, Wix. Let me show you how I did it. First up, go to Wix. I remember.
Okay, does everybody have a Word document up? Anyone need more time? Okay, so we'll watch this 4-minute video, and then as soon as it's over, you got 10 minutes or so to write. Okay?
Growing up, wanting to be white, I didn't want to be Asian. But after all of this, I did realize at some point I didn't actually want to be white. I just wanted to be treated like I was white. Yeah, adopted at 3 years old into a family in Philadelphia. Growing up predominantly in the white culture felt very isolating, especially as an Asian American, because you aren't Asian enough for Asians to really accept you. And then you're not white enough, but you're the token Asian guy. I would often get made fun of a lot though. Being called Ching Chan Chong, Chinaman, and Bruce Lee. I saw a lot of movies growing up, Breakfast and Tiffany's, the typical one you see, The Karate Kid, which when I watched those people, the Asian guys, it didn't make me feel good about myself. When I was in grade school, I remember just wanting to take this girl out to a dance. And when she told me that she didn't find Asian guys attractive, I was like, oh my God, like what's wrong with being an Asian guy? Like, why aren't we seen attractive? And what's wrong with me? When I was in college, the first compliment I ever got from any girl was, you're really good looking for an Asian guy. The microaggressions made me realize this is really f***ed up. Like, why am I accepting this backhanded compliment? Do they really see Asian men in general as weak, effeminate, not attractive? When I was online dating, I thought it was the worst being an Asian guy, and I thought maybe because I was also an Asian model, it would be a little bit better, because I've heard of online dating being horrible for Asian guys, but it was horrible. I mean, I literally remember days of just swiping and watching your white friends like kill it on online dating. You can literally just write no Asians on it anyway. It was almost like going to modeling castings. I didn't even get in the front door because they discriminated before they even saw me. And I got sick and tired of it. I felt awful about myself. There was a ton of self-loathing and self-hatred. That's when I felt like I didn't want to live. I know I didn't want to live. I didn't think I had anything to live for. I couldn't see myself getting out of this depression and anxiety. It just finally went down after years of lots of food, drugs, alcohol, partying, rock and roll, and it just collapsed, and I lost my health in 2013. That was the turning point where I realized I had to do something about this. I started saying, you know what, online dating. Instead of just swiping and being depressed, I was like, I'm getting off this shit, and I'm gonna do it the old school way. I had to let that old story, that old chatterbox in my head saying, well, you're not there because you're Asian. They might not like Asian. Dating in real life is better than dating online is because it is just super superficial. You can actually bring yourself to the person in real life and show them that you're a person, but you just so happen to be Asian. I want every person to embrace their own identity as male, female, white, whatever it is, because when I started to really embrace that and didn't want to become another race, that's when I started to really love myself and other people so differently. Because if you can't even love your own race and your identity, what makes you think other people want to be a part of that? If you can't accept it and love it and celebrate it. A lot of movies.
All right, 10 minutes. Descriptive and formative annotation. 2 more minutes. That's pretty good. Anyone else need a little more time? Okay, so I'm curious if anybody's willing to. So if you have the Google Drive where you access these slides, there is the Word document on there. If anybody wants to just copy and paste what they have up there, we'll kind of just look at it as a group. We'll kind of just talk about it as a group to kind of see what they've written, and see whether or not it's similar to you, and whether or not it is descriptive or not, or if there's some evaluation or critiques or analysis in there. So just if anybody's willing to probably put up there, hopefully maybe you can get at least one or two. So if you just want to copy and paste what you've written up there, once it pops up, then we can kind of talk about it as a class, as a group. So any volunteers? All right, thanks. Just go ahead and copy and paste that on there. Yes, AP exercises, yeah. And if there's anybody else who's willing to, just go ahead and access that and just go ahead and copy and paste that right underneath hers. What was your name? Stephania. Okay, so let's take a look at what Stephania had written for her descriptive annotation. So the video, and assuming what the name of the video is, interviews an Asian American male who shares his personal experience about fitting in society and his viewpoint on dating. It starts off by mentioning that growing up, it was hard to fit in both cultures, that is, white and Asian, because he was adopted by a white family. Moreover, he mentions that seeing famous Asian figures in films did not make him feel good about his Asian culture. Regarding dating, he added that the first time he asked a girl out, she mentioned that, quote, she was not into Asian guys, unquote, and this further impacted the negative self-esteem he had. Similarly, in college, the first compliment he got inferred that Asians are typically not attractive. As they interviewed, he tried online dating, his self-image worsened as days passed, and he had no luck. He eventually reached a point in his life where he did not want to live because he did not see a purpose of life. This pivotal point for him was not caring about what other members of society had to say. His advice is to love and embrace one's own identity, as it is critical for others to love you. So, thoughts? Is this purely descriptive? Is it accurately summarizing what you took from that video? Are there things you're kind of like, well, is that this was different, or this is what I wrote? So, thoughts, feedback. What do you guys think? And you can compare it to yours if you wanted to, but some feedback on Stephania's descriptive annotation.
I thought it was good.
That was good? What about it did you think it was good?
How she mentioned, she put in examples of being white and Asian and white family.
Okay, so it was good because she had specific examples? Yeah. Okay. Yes?
I like the vocabulary.
The vocabulary in which she, yeah, go ahead.
Just certain words I didn't put in my paragraph.
Okay, and was it words that you heard in the video, or was it her own summary and paraphrasing of what happened, of what?
Yeah, I think it was.
Is there any particular ones that point that stick out to you? That you're referring to? Okay. Did anybody else kind of shape that last part in a similar way? In your own summary or your own annotation, in terms of how at the end, yeah, you wrote something similar to that?
Yeah.
And what did you write?
I wrote, he advised everyone to love themselves and not let their identity be a and empower themselves instead.
Okay, good. Sounds good. Other thoughts? So you heard it was good because there were specific examples, it was good vocabulary. What else?
I felt like it is the main points of the
What were the main points? At least that you took. And that she articulated in here.
Him not fitting in, and him not loving himself, and then him finding himself.
Okay, good. How many guys agree with Patricia on those main points? Were there other main points that you picked up on that you mentioned that she may not have mentioned?
how society project that in films and stuff, so
Okay.
it felt like it's not just me, it's everyone else.
Okay, so you kind of also touched on how the societal stigma or
Yeah.
norm that's helped shape how his feelings are. Okay, good, good. What else?
I like that you touched upon,
Okay, right. Anybody else mention that in their annotation about films and how Asians are portrayed in films and in media? You didn't necessarily, Josie, right? Josie did. Anybody else mention that? All right, what else? Is there anything that you wrote in your own annotation that Stephania didn't necessarily mention?
I talked about how he went to the Christian society and it led him into the circle of youth.
Okay, so you used more of the specific issues that he was dealing with. Did she address it in anywhere here in terms of that part of his life or part of his journey? How those for the impact of this negative self-esteem yet? Is that what you said?
Yeah, that and also like did not want to live.
Okay, right. So the self-image worsened as days passed. He had no luck. He eventually reached a point in his life where he did not want to live because he did not see a purpose in his life. So that's kind of what you were getting at, but she was more broad and more general versus the specifics, right? Anybody else want to put up their annotation? Let's see how you guys edited what you wrote. And you can see we're pretty nice about Stephania's. Right? We're not tearing it out. Right? We're trying to see what people are writing, how they're writing it, what they are writing, so we can say, okay, am I writing very similar things? Did I get the same point as them? Or did I completely miss the point of what I was watching? Right? So anybody else want to put theirs up? Is that over here? So what now? Did you want to figure this out?
It might take me a while to get onto the folder.
So was there anything distinctive about this source that you wrote about in your annotation? Think about all the different sources that you guys have used in your undergrad, that you might have searched already in the past week or so related to this program. What are most of the things that you guys are sourcing? Articles. So what's distinctive about this source? The video. So what type of data does this yield? Qualitative data. Most of the research that we do in psychology, allied health, public health, communicative disorders, what else are you guys studying here? Counseling, is a lot quantitative despite counseling, right? A lot of qualitative research. So I wanted to bring in a different type of source that you can still do an annotation on, because it's the exact same skill set that you're going to be using when you're reading an article, in terms of reading it, paying attention to what it is that you're trying to do, and writing about it, but just doing it in a different format. Okay. Okay. Is this yours?
Yes.
Okay. So the video.
Oh, it's
I'm
not.
not-
Oh, I'm sorry. I was like, that was very simple. I'm like, that's what we're talking about later on after this plagiarism. Okay. Okay. So this is what Amy had. So Kevin is a Korean American male that explains the hardships of self-identity and racism. Kevin speaks about his life journey and traumatic experiences on racial remarks and lack of knowledge on his culture and the negative consequences associated with it. At a very young age, he was bullied about his Asian features, making him different and less appealing. As a young adult, he underwent hardship in the online dating world for his ethnicity, and thus rejection led to his depression. Hurt by such microaggression and lack of knowledge on his own culture, Kevin underwent a downward spiral. After hitting rock bottom, Kevin realized the importance of embracing and loving oneself, not allowing such negative comments and stereotypes to hinder his well-being. In addition to his prior experiences on online dating, Kevin remarks the importance of self-awareness and real-life dating as a healthy option for self-acceptance. Thoughts, comments? Does Amy's summary match Stephania's? Or are they different messages? Are they saying something different? Or are they pretty parallel? Secrets. You can also pull this up on your own screen too, if you have this up. So what do you guys think? Are they saying the same thing, or are they slightly off message? Are they congruent? What do you think, Danny? What do you think? Do you think the same?
I feel like Stephanie was a little bit more detailed than I was.
Okay. Okay. Stephanie, what do you think?
I like how she used like words that like kind of convey the whole message, such as racism, self-identity, and rejection.
Okay.
I think words like that really convey the message in the video. But I agree. I think the message is pretty much the same. I'm a little bit more descriptive, but yet with the words she used, I feel like even though she was concise, like people can get the same message across from me first.
Okay. Other thoughts? Was it an accurate? Did Amy have an accurate representation of what was in the video? Okay. Anything else? So these are pretty good. Yeah.
As someone who is interested in the Asian American Pacific Islander community, I wanted to explicitly give props to Amy for specifying that he was Korean American, just because it does help to disaggregate when you're talking about big groups of folks, right? Specifying if they were Korean American versus Asian American versus, Mexican or Latino, right? It helps to provide that specificity. So I just like that.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, so we get an idea of what a descriptive or informative AB is, or annotation is. Okay. So then what was the other type of AB that we could write? An analytical or critical one. So let's talk about that type. Any questions about descriptive ABs though? How many of you guys thought that that was not too difficult in doing? So let's talk about the other type of AB, the analytical or critical one. And of course, it not only describes or summarizes the source, but the biggest thing is that it examines what the strengths and weaknesses are. And not only are you looking at and evaluating the strengths and weaknesses of the actual source in itself, but you're also describing the applicability of those authors' conclusions, of their findings. How applicable is it to what you are doing? Your own research question, your own perspective, your own thoughts about what things are happening, and whether or not you agree or disagree with them. Right? So this is the point of an analytical or critical AB. So when you think about how do we analyze or how do I critically analyze or evaluate a source, two different ways you can do this. Right? And I encourage you to do both of them. First one is the initial appraisal, looking superficially at the author, the publication, the edition or any revisions that were done, the publisher, and the actual journal itself. But then reading more for the content in itself. Right? Who was it intended for? What was the objective reasoning? Or is there any objection? Or is there a subjectiveness? Is it covering everything? Writing style and evaluating reviews. And we'll talk about each of these in more detail. So let's start with the initial appraisal, the author. Right? You want to assess. The whole point is what value does this particular source have in my research? So the first thing is who's actually writing it? Who's the ones that put together this particular piece? Asking about their credentials. Right? Where did they go to school? Affiliation. Active educational background, other types of writing. Essentially, what is their expertise, right? You can use all sorts of different things to find out someone's reputation or experience. There's things like the Marquis Who's Who publication, Of course, the articles themselves will also have the information about the actual or the author, right? Whether it's the institution that they're affiliated with. Sometimes they'll have more information about their title about the authors. So things to look for to figure out who is or who are these people that are putting together this source. Has your instructor mentioned this author? Right? If you're taking an obesity class, in childhood obesity, and you keep seeing or you keep hearing your professor mention this person's name over and over and over again, that might be a reason why. Or is that author's name cited in other sources? Right? Is this a highly cited individual? How would you know if that person is highly cited? How could you go about finding that answer out? Okay, yes. So you could, so where would you go to look for that?
Like Google Scholar or the databases online.
Good, right? So you're going to either use the databases that you would do to find the actual articles themselves. When you actually find an article, there's all sorts of different things on the sides. One of those is usually cited by, and it usually have a number. How many times has that particular article been cited? But you can even Google a particular person's name and figure out how many times that person has been cited as well, right? So there are different ways to figure out how much clout has somebody has in terms of how many times they're being cited. And then is the author associated with a reputable institution or organization, right? If they're affiliated with Harvard Medical School, affiliated with Yale, affiliated with the CDC, right? And what kind of reputation does that organization have? They're affiliated with the California Endowment, they're affiliated with the Robert Wood Foundation, right? So if these certain organizations or institutions that you're familiar with, you're kind of like, all right, I understand that you're working here, or you do school there, or you're part of this affiliation, which kind of gives a little more credibility to the authors. Right? Oops. Date of publication. When was the source published? Generally, how far back should you be searching for articles to use as literature? About 5 to 7 or so years, right? Because depending on the field in itself, some things are always changing. Things related to science, things related to health, we know they're always evolving. Right? New studies come out, new findings come out. So not only thinking about when was it actually published, but also is the source current or is it outdated? And so thinking about, again, on some topics, nothing's changed. Research methods, nothing's changed in that. Right, so when I teach research methods, it's the same methodology that we've had 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Right? But when we're talking about personal health, talking about cardiovascular disease and cancer, I'm always refreshing, trying to figure out, okay, what is new this semester that I need to talk about? Right, so thinking about, right, if you're doing research and you're taking a 2-year program for your master's thesis and you find an article now, and all of a sudden you're ready to defend your thesis 2 years later, that article may be obsolete. There might be new findings from what you're citing from that particular article, right? So think about this ongoing search for research to figure out what is current, what is up to date, because what I might be reading now from 2006, right, could very well be not even true anymore, not valid. Edition or revision. Is this the first edition of the publication or not? Most of the time when we're talking about journal articles, you don't have this editions, right? It's more so when it comes to books, in terms of editions. But we know that books can also be great credible sources of information when it comes to our literature review. If you're reading a web source, do the pages indicate revision dates? You can go to any type of, know if this links to, this will not link to. Wait. articles up where I want. Let's see, this just at least gives me an example. No, it's not. Let's just go here. Of course. Okay. Let's see if this will give us access back. Okay. How do I get out of here? I just want to get to the article. Okay. So we see that this article was published, obviously today, whatever time this was published, but many times these types of news articles will be updated. If something happened, right? News cycle comes up. So it's a matter of checking to see updated last, right? That's if you're going to use sources that are not necessarily scholarly, that are published in a journal, right? Something to keep in mind in terms of revisions or updates to a particular page. Okay, so just wanted to just bring that to your attention in the event that you use these other sources for your research. Questions so far? So the publisher, note the publisher. Many people don't consider looking at this, but it is something that you can critique at least, right? So many times you'll see that a particular journal or particular article is published by a university press. Most of those things are going to be scholarly articles, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good quality. Okay? So don't necessarily say, because it is a really good publisher, that everything that comes out of that particular publisher is a good article. Okay? Think about whether or not it's actually applicable to your research. Which leads us to the last piece, which is the journal, or the title of the journal. Is the actual source scholarly, or is it considered a popular source? So New York Times, Huffington Post would be what of those two? Popular. So what would be a highly esteemed scholarly journal that you guys are familiar with? It's actually the #1 journal in the world in terms of prestige and scholarliness. You're gonna have to know. Is Time scholarly or popular? It's popular. Not science, but it is a science journal. What was it? PubMed? Is PubMed a journal? What's PubMed? It's like a repository or a database. So have you guys ever heard of Nature before? Nature journal. So Nature is the world's most scholarly, highly esteemed journal. Part of that is because the number of articles that are being published, the number of articles of those articles being cited, in terms of how much impact the research is being used in the community. And so, is it familiar with JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, American Journal of Public Health, American Journal of Epidemiology, right? So there are Lancet, and even the Journal of Medicine. So there are these really highly esteemed journals that many people within certain fields are very familiar with. So those are certain things that if you're in a particular field, you should become familiar with what are those top journals that people publish in and cite. And so I have a link here, distinguishing scholarly from non-scholarly periodicals, a checklist of criteria. So if you want to take a look, or at least peruse through this link to take a look at how to best evaluate scholarly and non-scholarly sources. All right, so then switching to the content analysis. First one is intended audience, right? So thinking about what is the type of audience in which the writer or the author was intending for people to read, right? Is it for lay people? Is it for experts in the field, right? Are they using particular jargon that if you haven't taken a class or in that particular field have no idea what they're talking about, right? Or is it using layman's terms for any person to read? It's a publication aimed at a specialized or general audience, and is the source too elementary, too technical, too advanced, or just right for what you need? Again, if you are doing a highly technical scholarly journal article, you might want something that is much more technical, right? As opposed to something that's coming from the New York Times or something that's coming from Huffington Post that might be more elementary, right? Not necessarily laden with a bunch of citations and evidence and sources. Objective reasoning. Is the information covered fact? Is it opinion, or is it propaganda? If the source is opinion, does it automatically mean that it is not valid? If it's opinion, does it mean that that source is not a valid source? Yes or no? Raise your hand if you think no. If it's an opinion piece, it is not a valid source. Raise your hand yes. If it's an opinion piece, it can be a valid source. What would make an opinion piece a valid source? What was that? If it has facts. But if it's an opinion, then what do you mean by facts? To help make their argument for what opinion that they have, right? So if I have this position, right, I can respect that regardless if I agree with it or not. But as long as you're backing up that opinion with some evidence, with some facts to support that particular perspective. Does the information appear to be valid or well researched, or is it questionable and supported? Make a claim. Well, because I said so, because of my experience, because I did it. What about somebody else? Right. We saw Kevin's experience as an Asian male, straight Asian male. I'm an Asian male. I'm not straight, so do I feel the exact same way as him? Hell yeah, I do. I have the exact same experiences that he had. Right? So how does that help frame my perspective in terms of my research when it comes to being a minority, whether it's being gay, whether it's being Asian American, or other types of things I can check off? Are the ideas and arguments advanced more or less in line with other works? Right? We know that we can compare and contrast. That's one of the things that we do in an annotation is, how does this article compare to another article? How does that contrast to another article? Whether it's the methodology, the findings, the sampling, the population, right? And do those things depart, or are they congruent with what other research is saying in the field? Right? Or is it really outlandish, outlying information? You're kind of like, well, what's going on there? Why is this when everybody else is saying this and finding this? And is the author's point of view objective and impartial? Or are they using bias? Or are they using emotionally arousing words to kind of get you riled up, instead of using facts and evidence to support that opinion or that perspective? Coverage. Does the work update other sources, substantiate other materials you have read, or add new information? What's the point of this source? Is this congruent and supporting other things that I've read? Is it giving me new insights? Is it substantiating this? What value is this contributing not only to my research, but to the entire field as well? Does it extensively or marginally cover your topic? You should explore other resources to obtain a variety of viewpoints. One thing that I find many times in my students' literature review and proposals for research methods, when they're arguing why they want to study a particular research question, is that all the literature is supporting what they want to do, what their hypothesis is. But of course, there's information out there that is all, what's the word? Contradicting, thank you. So you can't just pick all the articles that support my alternative hypotheses, because that's not always a fact, right? You have to have multiple perspectives, multiple views in terms of what is it you're covering. And then lastly, is the material primary or secondary in nature? What do we mean by primary or secondary sources? Do not get this confused with primary secondary data. Two very different things. So what do we mean by primary and secondary sources? Talking about authors, about researchers, talking about data.
There's primary when the actual is being done, as if they're just talking about other materials they covered. Analyzing it in their own way.
You got it, exactly, right? So I'll fill in a few pieces there, right? So the primary is, I'm the researcher, I come up with the research question, I collect the data, and I'm the one who analyzes it, and I'm the one who actually writes it up, right? So when I'm writing up this article, I'm saying I'm the one that did the research, we're the one that got approved, this is a primary source, because I'm the one who did it, and I'm the one who's writing it. But many times in your literature review or in the introduction of your journal articles, they're citing other people's research, right? You don't want to cite my research when I'm citing Dr. Chandrasekhari's research. You want to go straight to her research article and say, hey, what did she say? Because now you're citing me as a secondary source. You cannot bank on me correctly interpreting what her research findings were, because I could have totally misconstrued what she had written, and now I'm publishing this, and you think, oh yeah, she said this. Well, hold on, she's saying, no, my article actually says this. He misinterpreted that in his own publication, right? So while you want to have a mix of primary and secondary sources, you want to be critical of the secondary sources and actually go back to the primary source and say, hey, did they actually interpret this correctly in their research? And thus, I look at it the same way or look at it differently. Right? What perspective do you have in interpretation of someone else's findings? Because we all interpret things very differently. Questions about coverage. And then the last two is going to be writing style and evaluation. So writing style, is a publication organized logically? Does it flow from information, from the introduction? Is there an arching story? Right? Are the main points clearly presented? Do you find the text easy to read or silted or choppy? In this case, in our example here was a video. So were you kind of lost? Was it all make sense? Was it a nice clean story from beginning to end? Right? Was it clean in terms of the writing style? And are the author's arguments repetitive? Do you want to have repetition or no? What do you think? Are the author's arguments repetitive? Would you want to have the argument be repetitive throughout that source or not? How many think it should not be repetitive? How many people think it should be repetitive? Yeah, I think the latter. Because if in the beginning you're talking about what the whole point is, and now 3 minutes later or 5 pages later, I'm like, well, what was the whole point again? But if you're in your background, in your literature, this is the case that I'm trying to make. And the methods, and halfway through, this message I'm trying to make. At the very end, right, the whole point was this, right? If we can keep that message along, then the person who's reading it or watching it thoroughly understands what the whole thesis is, what the whole point of that source is about. And then evaluative review. How many of you guys ever heard of the Cochrane Review? The Cochrane Review is, well, for lack of better terms, they look at all sorts of different articles that have been published about a particular topic, and they look at all those articles and compare them to each other. And essentially, they're the ones that say, okay, with the body of literature, what do we see? What are we reviewing in terms of that article, or in terms of that research? So we have critical reviews that essentially do that. If you're trying to talk about obesity, if you're talking about racism, if you're talking about poverty, right? There are reviews that are done that look at the quality of the work that's been published already, whether it's books or journals. So you can figure out what are they saying as a consensus. Because then once you go to that Cochrane Review, what can you go to figure out what kind of articles to use? Go to the references. Is the review positive? Is the book under review considered a valuable contribution to the field? Are there other types of researches or other types of books or other sources to go to besides these other articles? Because I've read some Cochrane reviews that say, you know what, all these articles are showing that there's no there's no evidence to show that this particular intervention works. So if this intervention doesn't work, then what else should we do instead? Right. Do various reviewers agree on the value or attributes of the book, or has it aroused controversy? And then for websites, I've given you another evaluation source that comes from UC Berkeley to figure out whether or not you want to evaluate a website. Right? We just looked at a video that you can find on Huffington Post. So you can go here to figure out how good is that particular source. We're going to talk about descriptive, which you guys have done already. We're going to do a next exercise, which is writing an analytical A/B. But evaluating that particular source for credibility, right? We know the Huffington Post is a popular journal or popular newspaper. A lot of opinion that comes from the writers from there. Right? So thinking about how good is this video if I actually want to talk about racism and dating and relationships in terms of it being a valid source. So that's what that source is there for you. So let's take a look at the previous example that we had from The Economist, but looking at an analytical critical A/B. This editorial from The Economist describes the controversies surrounding video games and the effects they have on people who use them. The article points out that most critics of gaming are people over 40, and it's an issue of age, not of the games themselves. While the author briefly mentions studies done around the issue of violence in gaming, it does not go into enough depth for the reader to truly know the range of studies that have actually been done in this area, other than to take his word that the research is unsatisfactory. The author of this article stresses the age factor over violence as the real reason for opposition to video games, and stresses good gaming has done in most areas of human life. This article is a good resource for those wanting to begin to explore controversies surrounding video games. However, for anyone doing serious research, one should actually examine some of the research studies that have been done in this area, rather than simply take the author's word that opposition to video games is simply due to an issue of generational divide. 190 words. The other one was 151 words. That was descriptive. So, comparing this to the descriptive A/B that we saw earlier, what are some things that you see here that are clearly different from the descriptive A/B that make this an analytical A/B?
So it's kind of putting more of their own opinion, like says if you want a good resource for wanting to begin and explore other ones.
Okay, good. What else?
You talked about how the author doesn't go to enough depth for the reader to truly know the research studies.
Right, and so what part do you think this person is referring to? You're thinking about an actual journal article. What section is he referring to in this part? So he's talking about the references, yes, but what section of a journal article would you be reading, would he be referring to? Not the methods. Description, is there a description in a journal article? So what are the sections of a journal article? The very first piece is what? Is the abstract, and then you have introduction, which includes what? So research studies, also known as your, is it learning about this, I think, tomorrow? Literature. Your literature review, right? So all the different sources, the literature review, it's your introduction. After that, you have your methods, you have your results, and your conclusion. So in this part, we're saying that it isn't, that the research is unsatisfactory. Which of those sections is he referring to? What was that? Introduction, the literature review. He probably just cited a few things here and there, sprinkled a few different articles and said, yeah, this is what we know. Instead of saying, look, there's 20, 50, 100,000 articles that have talked about this one thing. He hasn't mentioned any of those. Right? We can't just bank what he's saying on what kind of research there is or lack thereof. What else? What else is making this an analytical or critical annotation? What's similar in this annotation to the descriptive one?
It summarizes like at the beginning.
Good. We're still summarizing what the article was, what the source was. So if you want to go, when you go back later on, compare these next to each other. You'll see there's at least 2 or 3 sentences that are nearly verbatim, because they're still describing what the purpose was, what the results were, but everything else in between is, this is good, this is right, this is what we should do, which we shouldn't do, look at this, look at that, right? This is the analytical evaluative part. Questions? Okay, so we'll watch the video again, 4-minute video, but this time, you are watching it for the purpose of writing an analytical or critical annotation. Yes? And if you want, go back to those slides. Go back to that one side that had the table on there to figure out what are the pieces to evaluate and consider when we watch this video. Okay? All right, so let's watch this again.
I remember growing up wanting to be white. I didn't want to be Asian. But after all of this, I did realize at some point I didn't actually want to be white. I just wanted to be treated like I was white.